Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited today to meet with my friend Tom. And Tom and I were connected about a month ago. I heard his story, and it's so powerful, and his journey of recovery has been incredible. But I want to introduce this global audience today to Tom. Tom, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on. So I'm getting on, I'm 37-year-old British Army veteran. I've been a civilian longer than I was in the Army now, though. So I joined the Army in 2005. I left in 2012. I was in Infantry. During that time, I served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all over the world as well. Not in combat roles, in other words as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing today. That's got you in a great situation and got you in front of an audience. But let's go back in time a little bit, and let's talk about why did you join the British Army in the first place? What led you to that decision?
I couldn't get a job. So yeah, I mean, school didn't work for me. I was an idiot. I didn't like intelligence. I was just I, school just wasn't my thing. I think now, if I was at school, they would probably diagnose me with some condition, ADHD or something like that. I couldn't concentrate at school, pay attention, couldn't sit still, always messing around. I tried my best, but I just couldn't. After 5 minutes of the teacher talking, I was in another world. And that was just how I was all the way through school. So I didn't apply myself academically. I was also just kind of terrified of trying hard, I guess because success wasn't guaranteed. The prospect of putting forth effort and potentially failing just was too terrifying for me to consider, so I just didn't try. So at 16, I left school. Well, I was 15 when I left school. And I just bounced around from very low-paid jobs in factories, and I had a job cleaning chewing gum up off the pavement. I had all these jobs where the working conditions and the pay weren't great, and there was no career prospects there. I tried to go to college, like you guys call community college. That didn't work out because I was it's just the same thing as school. Couldn't pay attention. And by that time, I discovered cannabis as well. So, I was going nowhere fast in life. I was just going absolutely nowhere. So I was going to lower my camera a little bit. I was going nowhere. And
that's a hard place to sit in.
Yeah, I was getting desperate.
Yeah.
And I was like 17. And I was watching my friends go off to university. And I just felt like an enormous failure, and I thought I need to do something with my life. So I decided to go to the careers office. So my first move was to go to the Royal Navy, because that's what I'd kind of, as a kid, that always was what I fancied, sailing on the sea. As I found out many years later, I'm seasick, so probably not a great career choice. But anyway, I went to a Royal Navy careers office, and they were talking me through the process of joining. I just couldn't really find any jobs that I liked the look of. So then I looked at the RAF, and they taught me through their process, and it was going to take quite a long time, maybe as long as a year. And I thought, I don't have that long time, I'm not going to eat. So I looked at the Royal Marines, and their next intake was in, I think, the July of that year, of the next year or something. It was like Christmas time, this. So, and then I finally went to the Army Careers Office, and as long as I joined the infantry, I could be in there next week. So the recruiting sergeant was from the regiment that I joined, and he was like, "Yeah, we get you next week, mate. No bother." So, and I did they have this thing called barb test, which is just I guess it's kind of like an IQ test, but for chimpanzees. And
Yeah.
I did that, and what it did, it tells you which careers you're able to do, and I was able to do all of them. But the recruiting sergeant put quite a lot of pressure on me to join. He obviously got a bonus from the regiment if I joined, you know. So that was that. So yeah, I ended up joining the guards. So you know the guys with the big bearskin hats and the red tunics outside the palace. I did that for a while. And then so I finished my training first, of course. Went to like boot camp, which we don't call it that, but I went to boot camp and I did that for 6 months. And then when I finished there, I went down to London, did public duties, which is the Queen's Guards, for a few months. And then off I went to Germany, joined the battalion. It was an armoured infantry battalion. From there, deployed to Iraq. In between, travelled here, there and everywhere. Came back from Iraq. The battalion moved from Germany to the UK. And I just spent the next few years just going all over the world. Did a lot of drinking, a lot of met a lot of women. And then we did Afghanistan and rinse and repeat, you know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What year was Iraq?
2007.
And how long were you there for?
6 months.
Okay. What part of Iraq were you in?
Basra.
Basra? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came just after that. I came in 2008. I was in southern Baghdad.
Right. Well,
yeah.
So yeah, I was still there in 2008. We left because I deployed in the winter of 2007. Well, autumn, the fall. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we came back in kind of spring, summer.
Okay.
2008.
Yeah, so we just barely overlapped. Yeah, interesting. And what years were Afghanistan?
2010. Summer 2010. Came home before Christmas.
Mm.
So we deployed March, returned September, I think. Yeah.
For Iraq, you did that?
No, that was Afghanistan.
Afghanistan was 2007?
No, 2010.
2010, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
2010. Okay. And two very different operating environments, right?
I mean, so it's funny because the way I look back at it now, it was almost serendipitous that they kind of eased me in with Iraq. Iraq was pretty nice for a first tour, really. We got hit with a lot of IDF. Are all you listening as military? I guess there's some.
Not everybody. So indirect fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got hit with a lot of indirect fire, which is rockets that come from overhead that they fire from a distance. They kind of travel like this, you know. And yeah, that was pretty much daily. But for the most part, it was pretty safe. The rockets would land nearby, but it was just kind of a case of if it landed on you, you would toast, but if it didn't, you were fine.
Yeah.
And there's not really much you could do to defend except for lie flat on your tummy, which you did at first, for maybe the first 3 or 4 weeks. But, you know, after a few weeks of rockets landing every day, eventually you just sat there smoking your cigarettes, aren't you? You don't really move. Then you get new guys that come out and they're on the floor and they're like, what are you doing? Get down. And you're like, oh, whatever. Listen, if it's my time, you know?
Yep, that's exactly right.
You just sleeping, you know, you just pull the old Kevlar quilt back over yourself.
Part of it was that the enemy wasn't very good at shooting them. You know, they were shooting them from the back of vehicles sometimes or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we used to go out on motor base plate patrols and we found nothing but truck tracks, you know. They were just... and also, I mean, what I will say, so we got hit with improvised explosive devices as well on the side of the road. They call them roadside bombs, so they used to. And those were pretty impressive, the IEDs that they planted on the side of the road. They'd make these devices and then they would spread it. It just looked like a huge rock. But what they did was they'd have a little infrared device on it so that when the vehicle drove in front of it, it would trigger the infrared sensor, which would then detonate the device. And it's funny, the Brits and the Americans had two very ways of dealing with this. So, which you would think it would be the other way around, but it really wasn't. So we had this piece of kit called McCorber, which basically emitted a heat signal really far in front of the vehicle. And so you'd be driving down the road and 100 feet in front of you, the device would explode because it thinks the vehicle's past it. And what I saw the American guys do was they had a crowbar on the front of the van with an anode tip with a heat bulb in it. And so all the Iraqis would do, they would just tilt the device so it would fire backwards. And it still
We always got hit, yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I thought, I mean, this is like the most advanced military superpower in the world. And we were always the scrubbers, you know. That's how, when I was around the Americans, they always felt like we were the scrubbers with just like a shitty knife in our pocket and, you know, shit boots. And, sorry, can I swear?
Yeah.
I don't think I can swear.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'd see the American guys with all the, you know, like it's funny because looking back now, a lot of the stuff we had was probably better. Like the ration packs, we all used to be really jealous of your ration packs because, you know, those MREs and they were like kind of self-cooking steak things. And we were on beans, but baked beans, you know. But I think looking back, our ration packs were probably better for you. They were, I had some good ration packs in my time. You know, I had a French one once from a French Foreign Legion guy. It was... they had foie gras and venison in red wine stew also.
Oh, my goodness. No, ours were fake meat or just fatty meats.
It was like, I remember the ones that came in a little packet and it was like vacuum sealed.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be like a steak, but it was like, I don't know if it was made out of textured soy sauce.
It was so gross.
Yeah. And it had like, they just filled it with like herbs and stuff to make it have some flavour, but it was just tasted like leather, you know.
It's gross.
Yeah, looking back, our ration packs were pretty good, really. And when I was in Afghanistan, they were much better. They were good, the ones in Afghanistan. The lads used to fight over them. They were really good. But yeah, so Iraq was like a nice easing to it. That's the way I look at it. Because Afghanistan was an eye-opener. It was that voice of a different colour. Very much so.
Well, I never did Afghanistan. I trained units for it. I was Iraq and Africa. My time in Iraq, for the most part, was pretty chill. But there were moments where my interaction with the enemy was pretty severe, and so I was very glad to have an Africa deployment where it was a very different operating environment from Iraq. But what I've heard from Afghanistan is, say it again.
Did you go South Sudan, somewhere like that?
No, I was in 8 different countries. I ran a functional specialty team with civil affairs, so we were trying to do projects all over Eastern Africa, including the edges of Somalia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
During the Ebola crisis?
Yeah, actually, we tracked Ebola across East Africa. Yeah, we would get there, my team, right after the outbreak when people had already died, and we would tend to the orphans who were left behind and track down their cause. And what we found was that it was really related to people eating bush meat, you know, the monkey meat, and it was the monkey virus that combined with the humans that would create some of that stuff. But it was hard to prove because we didn't have labs, you know, to run all the testing, but we did do the finding. Pretty scary.
Yeah, it's a crazy time.
Yeah. So walk me through Afghanistan. You said it was a different experience. Talk me through some of your experiences that are the highs and the lows of Afghanistan, really.
Yeah, so I mean, I look back now, 15 years ago, and I look back with fondness now, because I was such a young man.
Yeah.
You know, I was 20, 22, something like that. And we were just babies. So it was really the dream tour, Afghanistan, because unlike Iraq, where we were operating as part of this big battle group, and you had like, you know, sergeant majors and colonels and all these people knocking about. In Afghanistan, we were knocking around in 5-man multiples.
Yeah.
In which there would be a lance corporal and 3 or 4 private soldiers. And we were living out in a little compound, miles away from civilization. And there was no reason grown-ups. There was no grown-ups around. It was just a bunch of kids being left to fight their own war. We had a lot of freedom, which, when you've got a group of young men, the oldest of which is 20, and they've got nothing but water, bullets, and grenades. You think freedom's the last thing they need, but we were actually remarkably responsible, all things considered. But I guess we just kind of so we deployed as a company group, so maybe 150 guys.
Yeah.
And we were spread out in these little compounds that weren't all that far away from each other. But in Afghanistan, half a mile it takes you forever to cover that distance because it's unlimitedly blocked.
Yeah.
And of course, time for ambushing them anywhere. But the terrain out there is really the people. So I was an interpreter, so my job was really dealing with people. But it was great. We had a lot of freedom, and we were just kind of free to do what. Sometimes that meant we didn't do as much patrol as we should, and sometimes it meant we did a little bit too much fighting when we maybe didn't need to do as much or whatever. But it was carnage. There was a lot of carnage. The fighting was ferocious during the summer day. So sometimes multiple times of the day, we'd be in firefights, and they would get as close as you could. It was just chaos. Friends have died. Little children die. Families, women. It's tragic. And when I look back now as an older man, I as a cynic, I see nothing but a tragic waste of human life. And sadly, I've come to think really, we have no business being there. And that, I don't let it anger me too much, but all the flag-waving patriots that think we should just go here, there, and everywhere fine, I think they're not very quick to send their sons to the careers office, it completely changed the trajectory of my life, Afghanistan. And I've no regrets, but it had a profound impact on me. Did that way, it changed me as a man.
Yeah.
Arguably for the better, I would say, but it took a long time to get to that point. There was I think until Afghanistan, the way I've once heard somebody describe this to me, that it fit perfectly. Until Afghanistan, my life was a roadless map. It was a mapless road. Didn't know where I was going. And after Afghanistan, it was a roadless map. The path had just disappeared. And it was a process. And also growing up to do, because I was at 22 when I came back from there. I think I was 24 when I left the army. And so I was kind of trying to become an adult whilst also navigating post-traumatic stress and recovery and growth. It was just a chaotic time.
Yeah, you mentioned seeing carnage, multiple firefights a day, and from interviewing lots of veterans around the globe, we all experience something very similar. Our fight or flight starts to break, and we don't end up getting into that flight. We always stay in the fight, and that fight is always present.
I heard this Australian guy talk about this when I was going through. We have a charity here called Combat Stress. They help veterans with mental health difficulties, and I heard that they have this Australian special air service talking about. He said with soldiers, you train to go towards the danger, and that doesn't just lead you straight away. So think about you driving down the motorway and you see an oncoming vehicle. Your instinct is to swerve. But for the soldier, his instinct is to speed up, straight down thing, because that's what he has to do. And then you bring him home from the war zone, but he's had this instinct instilled in him. And although I don't believe it's the training, I believe what happens is when you're actually in a war, that training is successful and you survive. And the survival through the use of that instinct to go towards danger and to become, more violent. The reward from that survival, which is like the ultimate side drugs, people smoke pot, they get high, they feel great. Well, I'll do that again. And I think the reward cycle of surviving through extreme violence when facing the threat becomes so psyche that suddenly when you come home and you're in a pub and somebody looks at you and you think he's looking at me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And the instinct isn't anymore, it might be, what's he looking at? Or to go over and say, what are you looking at? Now the instinct is to go over and stamp on his face until he's a puddle on the floor. And then you're in jail. And when I came home, that's what happened. I just kept getting arrested and locked up for fighting and violence. And this cycle just repeated itself. And it took me a very long time I've not mastered it yet. I still lose my temper, but I'm getting older and I'm getting a bit slower, so now I'm a little bit more careful.
Yeah, but that's a hard place to live in. That's a hard place. I remember not understanding what was happening with me. I'd be in a restaurant with my wife, and I couldn't sit with my back to the door. I remember seeing every guy in the room and measuring myself against them and saying, well, that guy's a bigger guy, but I'll kick his knee.
I'd watch how quickly they get up out of the chair to see how quickly they are on their feet.
Yep. Yep.
And you're looking at the windows and the doors. You're looking at potential weapons.
Yep.
Potential
Always.
Missiles. Things you can pick up and throw.
Yep.
How heavy. Yeah. I went through that for a long time.
Where do you live today, Tom?
I live in East Lancashire, which is in the northwest of England.
Okay.
So I'm like an hour's drive from Scotland and about 8 hours drive from London.
And is that where you grew up?
It is actually, yeah.
Tom, we were talking about post-traumatic stress and the heightened fight scene that develops within most veterans who have been in combat arms. We come home, we start to see things that maybe are real and aren't real, right? Like we see somebody look at us a certain way and suddenly we take it as a threat. Somebody gets too close on our bumper and it's a threat.
Place. I've done some of my best work in the car that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
I've been awful in the car. There's something about driving that turns you into a savage. There's been times people have behaved poorly on the road, and I've taken the law into my own hands. And I've been like, we have a comic book over here called Judge Dredd. I don't know if you've heard of that in America.
Well, it's the movie Judge Dredd. Yeah, it's a movie.
Okay, yes, Sylvester Stallone, of course, yeah. So that was a British comic book, and I was like that. I decided I am the law, very much so. And I would just pull people out of the cars and beat the snot out of them really badly. Yeah. And I'm so lucky I managed to avoid jail. And of course I regret it, but when you're in that headspace, it's a horrific place to be. It's not a happy place to be. It's funny because people think maybe that because you seem in control in these situations that you must be all right with it, but you'd much rather not. How much better is it to just be like, oh, that guy just cut me up. Oh, well, let him get on his way. But when you're in that headspace, you behave like that not because you want to establish dominance, but because it's coming out of fear, isn't it? It's fear. Everything is a threat, and you're so accustomed to every threat being a threat to your life that you respond to every threat in the same way. You know, I mean, it's cost me the earth. It's cost me everything. My children have suffered as a result of it. My ex-wife, some of my friendships. It is having an incredibly damaging effect. Yeah, my decisions. You know, that's the sad truth of it, is that I've had to acknowledge that. And so, as I was saying there, it's a fear-based. It becomes, I was going to say behaviour, but it becomes a lifestyle, you know, and it cost me the earth. I mean, the thousands and thousands of pounds worth of damage that I caused to my old property, ripping doors off the walls and smashing holes in walls and windows, and, you know, and then, of course, the mental health challenges that's caused on my children and my ex-wife, and, you know, time in psychiatric wards in hospitals is sort of non-refundable. You know, you don't get that back. And then, of course, the path it led me down, which was the kind of loony bin pathway where you end up on loads of medications, and it's all men in white coats, so to speak. You know, and yeah, it was like I had this chaotic couple of years of my life, and then it led to being sedated for a few years, heavily dosed up on drugs. And for a while that felt safe. It kind of became a crutch, I guess. Even though I was deeply unhappy on all the medications that they put me on. And then I was grotesquely overweight and just miserable. At least everybody was safe, myself included.
Yeah, what a difficult process that we all have to go through in terms of recovery. And like you mentioned, it's partially from the training, where we hear a loud noise and we run towards it. We don't run away from it. The other piece is that our brains become conditioned. Neural pathways start to develop, and it automatically takes us to a certain place every single time. And so the rewiring of the neural pathways to a place of nonviolence, to empathy, to all of these other elements of healing take time. And in the process, we suffer, our families suffer, and it's an unfair thing that many combat veterans from all the great wars have had to deal with. And you know, unfortunately, we haven't grown as a society, a civilization, to the point where we can recognize and help veterans really adapt better.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because you've got that kind of, my philosophy is that, you know, we're all responsible for our choices and our actions, even when they're absolutely terrible, no matter how badly guided they are by trauma. But at the end of the day, if we're going to put guys in that situation, we should equip them with the tools to handle what it's going to throw at them when they're no longer in that situation. And I think part of it was just a lack of insight. I think certainly from because we never did Vietnam, and so between the Second World War and Afghanistan, there wasn't a lot going on. There was a bit in Korea, there was a bit in Aden, and then the Falklands. But the Falklands was only a few months long.
Yeah. And
from what I can gather, I think fewer than 300 British soldiers died in the Falklands War, but hundreds committed suicide. And you know, they were fighting at bayonet point, up mountains in the snow, and it was horrific, but it was only a few months long. I think with Afghanistan, you know, it was years of prolonged extreme violence. And the guys that were in my kind of bracket in the military, in the T-Thorns, that were, you know, veterans of Afghanistan around that time, 2008 to kind of 2012, they left the army en masse, left the military en masse, you know. So many of the younger guys, the ones that they just left. And I get it, you know, because I went from being you know, a young guy in battalion looking up to my company sergeant majors and colour sergeants to suddenly come and being like, you there?
We're back again.
Where did I get to?
You said that you had a couple of your sergeant majors who were talking about this healing or this recovery process.
Oh no, so what I was saying was how I'd gone from being a young guy in the battalion and looking up to my sergeant majors and whatnot, to then being sort of 22 and looking at these company sergeant majors and colour sergeants, whoever, regimental sergeant majors, and thinking, I've seen more action in 6 short months than you've seen in your entire career. You know, these guys have done hundreds of hours and weeks in Northern Ireland, or maybe in Cyprus or Kosovo or whatever. And there was lads who were 19 years old that had seen more action, sometimes in a week, than these guys had seen in their entire careers, you know. And I think we just became the kind of generation that no longer belonged. The guys that got through that and stayed in are now all my peers. Now all my friends are they're all sergeant majors now, you know, or retiring. Some of them have retired, some are retiring, some are in the last couple of years. But for the most part, we all got out. We all left. We all left before we were 25, and it's funny because I'm still in touch with a few of them, and sometimes we even meet up now and again. And now we're just kind of approaching middle age and a bit thick around the middle, and yet we kind of have our peaceful lives. But when we get together, you know, we still remember the days when we were kicking doors in and throwing grenades around. And it's funny, we kind of look back and laugh now at the chaos, but it came at a great cost to a lot of us, really did. But yeah, as you were saying, you know, we just weren't equipped to deal with the stress that it came with. That was the tragic thing.
Yeah. Do you know other guys who, through your experience of a wellness journey, that have been struggling, that you've been able to reach out to and share your story and help them find a way of healing?
Yeah, do you know, it's funny because I was kind of the first. So basically, I knew very quickly when I got home from Afghanistan that I wasn't right. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something wasn't right. I remember being in Oxford train station near Brize Norton, which is the RAF base where you fly into, and just wanted to murder everybody. And I also wanted to burst into tears, and I couldn't really understand that feeling. I kicked the shit out of one of my friends on the train on the way home. It's horrible. And then I got home, and I was only on leave for 2 weeks. I was going back out to Afghanistan, and I was fighting just about every night. I got arrested 3 times. My last night in England before I went back to Afghanistan, I spent in the jail cell. And the day before I went back, I'd gone to see one of my friends who got blown up just a couple of weeks before. So he was now a triple amputee. I'd been to see him in the hospital, and then I drove home, and then I got myself arrested that night. But because I knew I wasn't right, I made the decision to leave the army because I didn't want to get found out for being emotionally fragile, I guess. I didn't want that becoming public knowledge. So I left the army. And then maybe a year later, it got too much for me, and I had a massive breakdown. I had just a nervous breakdown, and that was when I ended up in the hospital and stuff. And my ex-wife was quite public about it. I think she maybe enjoyed the attention and the validation, and also the vindication of the fact that she'd been suffering with this as well. And she just wanted, I think, people to put an arm around her because I've been so horrible. for all this time. And so she kind of was quite public about where I was and why I was there. You know, he's in the hospital, he's in the psychiatric ward, he's getting the help he needs. And so a lot of my friends who were soldiers saw that, and they were all reaching out, you know, being quite supportive, I guess. But then over time, as I started, I wouldn't say recovering at that point, but as I started navigating life with some acceptance that I was damaged from the war, one by one, blocks would start reaching out to me, just telling me how they're feeling, how things are manifesting themselves for them, asking for help. What do you do? Who do you go to see? What do you tell them? You know, and eventually, within a couple of years, I probably had 30 or 40 of my friends that I'd served with reaching out to me, saying they were struggling to deal with the same things that I had been. It just took them longer to come to acknowledge it. And I think the other thing was my mental health was already quite fragile before I joined the army. I'd had a crazy life until that point already. So for me, it was kind of just Afghanistan was a delicious little cherry on top of a fucking chaotic cake. And so yeah, a lot of guys did reach out to me eventually and start asking me, you know, like I'm piling in here, I'm not doing well, struggling with my mental health, I'm losing my temper all the time, X, Y, Z, and yeah, I had to try and, I guess, guide them, and I couldn't really because I wasn't in that place myself. You know, I was just dosed up on medications. But I get why it's so hard for them, because I remember going to the doctor, and obviously I'd left the army at this point, so I was just a civilian general practitioner, and I'd walk into the office, and you know, soldiers walk a certain way, don't they? And I'm tall, I'm 6'3", and I wasn't a bad-looking lad in my day as well. I was kind of pretty, and so I'd stride into the doctor's office, this tall, slim, I was slim back then, slim, blonde guy, and I'd, you know, smile at the nurse as I walked in, and I'd sit down, and the doctor would say, "How can I help you?" And I'm supposed to then convince this guy that I'm at the end of my tether, and I didn't know how to act like I wasn't okay. And so I'm telling him, like, you know, I think about killing myself every single day. Every night I go to bed and I just hope that I die in my sleep. And every morning I wake up and I just think, oh, I've got to live another day, and maybe today's going to be the day that I do it. And then I'm telling him that I just want to kill everybody else as well. And he's sat there thinking, well, you fucking look all right to me, pal, you know. So they just say, try these antidepressants, and they give you some Prozac or whatever. And that was kind of how it went for a long time, until eventually they gave me this particular antidepressant, and it was called paroxetine. You guys will probably know it as Seroxat. And it sent me psychotic, which I've now found out is like a side effect of Seroxat. It's been responsible for lots of suicides and psychotic episodes. And I took this, and it just sent me, like I was like that Joker out of Batman, you know, just sent me a loopy. I became manic and crazy, and my behaviour was off the reservation.
Were you struggling with sleep at the same time?
Oh yeah, I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things combined when you talk about the declining mental health, the drugs that they put us on, which make us more in thought, psychotic, and then you're not sleeping, so you're not recovering, you're not getting the right proper healing.
Yeah, I mean, when I came back from Afghanistan, when I was still serving, me and the lads, none of us slept for months. I remember I'd been led there in my bed, and every time I shut my eyes, it sounds silly, but it's like a video playback of Afghanistan, you know, and it's never the good times that you remembered. It was never sitting around a candle in the dark playing cards or talking about what we're going to do when we get home. It's always, you know, just chaos. And I remember one night laying in my bed and I thought, this is ridiculous. So I opened my door, and and it was like 3 a.m, and as soon as I opened my door, another door opened, and then another one, and then another one, and everyone popped their heads out, and we were all out. None of us are sleeping, and then we're not.
And I remember going to the doctor and getting Zopiclone, which was a sleeping tablet. I don't know what you call it over there. Because everything's generic names here. We don't have branded drugs, you know. So anyway, I got this sleeping medication from the doctor. And when I went back to renew my prescription, they wouldn't give it me. And the reason they wouldn't give it me was because everybody was on it. And so they thought there was some sort of conspiracy among the lads to just get high on the sleeping drugs. As opposed to what was actually happening was we were all fucking pickled from the war. And that was when it kind of dawned on me that the military medical establishment at this point hasn't ascertained the scale of the psychological damage that the war in Afghanistan has done. And of course, at the time, none of us really wanted to admit that we were struggling either, because we were young men. You've got all that bravado and machismo stuff to maintain, you know. So it was difficult for us to be able to confess that we were struggling, you know. Yeah, so, but the sleep thing was bad. I remember I slept in the bath for a long time. It was the only place I could seem to sleep was the bath. I don't know why.
Maybe you felt safe, yeah.
Maybe it reminded me of the old breeze block tombs with the concrete lid and at the top the Kevlar lid in Iraq. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever it was though. And of course there was bedwetting as well.
Yeah.
It was chaos. Just no sleep. That lasted for a long time until 2013, when they put me on all the antipsychotics, because those were a sedative. When I was on those, I was sleeping 18 hours a day plus.
Yeah, yeah, you were a zombie.
Yeah, oh yeah, I was dead. I was dead inside. You
Yeah.
know, behind the eyes, there was nothing. I was just sleepwalking. Yeah, sleepwalking all the way through my life.
Yeah, it makes me sad to hear this, Tom, because there are so many of us global veterans who go through the same type of a process, especially when we have a government that doesn't really understand what we're going through, and so they drug us at a certain point, and that sedation doesn't help our mental health. Really, it makes it decline even more. But how have you gotten from that place to where you are today? What's that journey been like?
It's been amazing. It's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. So at the back end of 2015, I was at this point closing in on 300 pounds without an ounce of muscle on my body. There was just, it had all gone, everything. And I was really, really pasty and white and pale because I just didn't leave the house. You know, I tried, you know, I did try. I went to CrossFit, but I couldn't do I had no, and that was embarrassing, you know, because I was supposed to be this army veteran guy, and then I went to CrossFit and I'm unfit and slow and sleeping, and I couldn't drag my ass out of bed in the morning to get there, and it was horrific. Eventually it got too much for me, I piled in, and eventually I quit altogether. So fast forward a couple of years, at the end of 2015, I'd gone on a family holiday with my wife and kids. We'd gone to the Canary Islands. And I didn't want to leave my hotel room because I was so fat and pale, and because I had this on my arm. I don't know if you can see it. Because I had this on my arm. I didn't want anyone to see that on my fat, disgusting body. So I kept covered up. I was so ashamed of myself. And I decided one night, enough's enough, I'm getting off these drugs. So this was December 2015. And of course, I didn't take any medications that night. I was on quetiapine at the time, Seroquel, and I couldn't sleep. I was grinding my jaw, my muscles in my neck were all tense like this. And so I thought, I'll go down to the hotel bar and I'll have a drink, and then I'll be able to sleep. I ended up having a skinful, and I passed out on the bathroom floor at home. I'd thrown up all over the place. The kids found me the next morning and they were mortified. You know, Dad's not well. My ex-wife was furious. And so I thought, okay, maybe now's not the time, but when I get home, I'm coming off the drugs. So I started weaning off them, lowering my dosage. I was on 600 milligrams a day. and I weaned it right down to essentially I was doing like a grain of salt sized piece of maybe, 10 milligrams, 25 milligrams, something like that. And no withdrawal. New Year's Day, 2016, I've been on this piece of salt-sized medication from 2 big fat tablets a day. There's almost nothing in it. And on New Year's Day 2016, I decided, right, this is it. We're going right down to the. I couldn't cut them any smaller at this point. And that night, I didn't take anything, and all the withdrawal effects, as if I hadn't even gone through this weaning process.
How frustrating.
And it was horrific, but I was determined to stick with it. So I stuck with it, and for 3 months, I didn't get a wink of sleep, not a wink. And I was in agony because my neck was so tense. My teeth, I don't know if you can tell, but
yeah,
they're kind of small. They're kind of small now because I ground them down from grinding so much. So my teeth probably lost like a good, maybe 1/8 of an inch or something of the height of my teeth, So I've got kind of small teeth now. I just grinded them down like that because I couldn't. I was just in bed, tense like that. Every muscle in my body was tense, and so I would wake up with cramp. But eventually, it got out of my system, and I was able to get bits of sleep, 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, and then I was able to start walking. I'd go for walks, 5 hours, 6 hours sleep. I'd go for jogs. I wouldn't get far. I'd maybe do a mile in like half an hour,
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing it. Eventually, I started working again, and I started playing rugby, and that kind of set things off a little bit for me in terms of where I go from here.
You started to see changes in your body as you started to make progress moving?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I lost, 5 stone in... I'm going to ask the wiretap 1 second.
Yeah.
In fact, no, I can work it out. 5 times 14 is... what's 5 multiplied by 14? Be 70?
Yeah, it's just under 90, yeah.
Well, I lost about 70 pounds without really trying, just by coming off the medications. So I'd gone from being, grotesque to being just above like my kind of normal healthy weight, which when I was in the army had been around 210, 215. I was now like kind of 235. So as I started losing weight, that gave me a little bit more mojo, I guess, to go out and go to the gym again. But eventually, in 2016, I went through Combat Stress's treatment program. And although it didn't do me a great deal of good, I picked up a lot of things while I was there that were kind of part of the program, but not the main thing. So I started doing yoga. I started meditating, which I don't do now, but at the time I think there was some benefit to it for me. But yoga was just physically beneficial for me. But mindfulness became a really good thing for me to do. I started engaging in mindfulness. But what also happened at that time was one of my friends who was an amputee was doing the Invictus Games while I was at Combat Stress. And I hadn't spoken to this guy for a few years. In fact, the reason I hadn't spoken to him was that every time I saw him, he was like a massive trigger for me. The fact that he had no legs anymore, the fact that I remembered him losing his legs and things like that. I guess, I don't know, it was difficult for me to pinpoint it, but seeing him seemed to set me off. And he'd done the Invictus Games, and I hadn't spoken to him for a while. So I messaged him and I said, I've seen you on the telly doing the Invictus Games, well done. Sorry I've not been in touch. It's been a difficult period of time. And he called me immediately And he said, why have you not been in touch? And I said, I don't know. And he said, I think I understand. He said, does it set you off when you see me? And I felt so guilty. You know, I felt terrible. And I said, yeah, it does. And he said, meet me next weekend in Nottingham. I'm going to an event. So I said, okay. So I went down to Nottingham and I met him at this sports hub. It was a Help for Heroes sports hub. They were running this, it was just where you could try all these different adaptive sports and things. And I thought, well, what good's this to me, Dave? I'm studying with 4 limbs, you know, I'm not that guy. There was all these amputees walking around everywhere. And he said, well, just get stuck in, you know, do the ones for, there was sports there for able-bodied guys as well. He said, just have a go, see what you think. So I had a little try at some of the events and stuff, and there was like a form to fill out. So I filled out the form and it said, you know, would you like to come back and try any sport in particular? So I ticked a couple of boxes, powerlifting, archery, a few others. And then I got invited to a training weekend with Help for Heroes. And I thought, this is cool, yeah, I'll go. And I went down and it turned out that what it was a training camp for potential Invictus Games applicants. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a go anyway, you know, whatever. I'd come to acknowledge at this point that the Invictus Games was about more than just amputees and guys who'd suffered physical life-changing injuries, I guess. And I was okay with it. There were people there that weren't combat veterans at all. So it didn't bother me so much. And I applied for the Invictus Games. But in the process, what had happened was I'd taken up these hobbies and I'd joined athletics club. I'd become a very enthusiastic powerlifter and an archer. And I enjoyed it. I was loving it. I didn't get selected for the games, but they selected me to go and represent at the Warrior Games in America in Colorado. So I went to that.
What year?
2018. And it was great. I absolutely loved it. And I met loads of great guys who I'm still friends with now. Guys from the US Air Force, SOCOM, US Army. And like I say, you know, people I'm still friends with now, almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
It's been a long road when I look back now. So, in fact, I actually went to Florida last year to judge the powerlifting at the Warrior Games, which was nice. But yeah, so I made loads of new friends, and I kind of had my mojo back. I had my, you know, I felt I was feeling good. I was back to training again, and I had drive and I had purpose, and my life had meaning again. And my wife and kids were seeing the benefit. They were getting a really good version of me. My mate Dave told me, you know, why don't you apply for the Invictus Games again? And I said, no, I'm done. I've got what I needed from it. I'm finished. I'm ready to move on. And he's at me, just apply. You never know, you might get picked. I said, I'm not bothered. You know, I've completed it. That was the way I saw it. Anyway, I applied and I bloody got picked, didn't I? So, so then we were off to Holland, to the Netherlands, but then we had lockdown with COVID. So that put a halt to the games. Training sort of really took a standstill. Luckily, I had a bit of a gym set up at home. It was very lucky, really. I was very fortunate. Some of the local charities had seen in the newspaper that I was doing the Invictus Games and had done some fundraising, and they bought me a gym.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was really, really kind. I sound silly getting emotional about that, but it was just
it's awesome.
People who never even met me, you know.
Yeah.
And I had this gym set up in my garage. So when lockdown came and nobody could train, I was training at home, only in the gym, but I couldn't go and do athletics anymore because the athletics track was closed. But it kept me going a lot through lockdown. Sadly, what also happened during lockdown was I split up with my ex-wife, and that had been, you know, she'd been through the bloody mill with me, and it was a shame because it was almost like just as things were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we went our separate ways. It was for the best. Looking back, you know, it was, but it was a tragedy nonetheless, you know, because we had children together. But that was sort of at the time, it felt where it culminated. And I went to the Invictus Games and I had an amazing time, although I was alone. My wife and children weren't with me. And all the rest of the team, for the most part, had their wives and children with them. So yeah. I did feel a bit lonely. But again, I had friends, you know, from the USA that were there, reconnected with old friends from the USA that I'd met from Warrior Games. Interestingly, when I was at the Warrior Games in 2018, I actually met up with a friend who I'd known when I was in Colorado as a soldier, which was really cool. But yeah, anyway, so after the games, I thought, this is it now. I'm definitely done with it now, you know. Everything seemed to peak there. I thought, now I'll just get on with my life, work, whatever. And then I just needed that thing again, something to focus on, something to give me purpose, something to give me drive. But it wasn't Invictus Games anymore. I knew that. I was definitely cooked with that. And what happened during lockdown, this is a ridiculous story, but during lockdown, all the barbershops were shut here because everything was shut. And my hair grew long. And people started coming up to me in the gym saying, you look like a wrestler. When I had my hair down, it's really, really long, you know.
Yeah.
And so people were coming up to me in the gym and saying, you look like a wrestler, you look like Triple H, you look like Edge, you look like whoever, you know. And I just thought, do you know what? I could be a wrestler.
Why not? Why not?
So that was the thing. That was my new Invictus Games. That was my, you know. So I found a training school. It's a bit of a dramatic journey. There was a lot of politics and fallouts with a couple of people that somebody took me under the wing, and then, well, I don't know, it didn't work out very well. You know, nobody's the villain in their own story, are they? But I guess I must have upset this guy. He certainly upset me. We parted ways. I ended up kind of going off on my own in the wrestling business, which is a tricky way to do it. But somehow I seem to have got to a place where now I've got regular work. But more importantly, I'm developing as a wrestler, as an athlete, and as a performer. Again, I've got great guys taking me under the wing now. I think I like being in the passenger seat. I like learning. I don't ever want to be the boss. I like to be learning and developing and growing all the time. My time will come when one day I'm the one bringing young people on. But for now, I like to be the young guy. And it's funny because I'm the same age as all the guys that have been in the business for 25 years. You know? But I've only been in the business a couple of years. I think, well, almost 2 years since I made my professional debut. And in that time, you know, it started off just working around Scotland and England, and then Wales, and then Ireland, and then, you know, eventually Malta. Next week, I'm going to Italy. I work with a touring company now that goes around the country, and they're amazing. These guys are like really consummate old school professionals who they know the job inside out, and they're really helping bring me on. And so now I have this crazy life where I run around in spandex and, you know, I get the crowd going. And I never imagined things would turn out this way, but it's funny because you've no idea where life's going to take you. You really don't. You know, this all happened totally by accident, and yet I feel like I found my calling. I feel like this is where I belong. And I also know that in 3 or 4 years' time, I'm probably going to pack it in and be like, what am I going to do next? And I've got no idea what that's going to be. Absolutely none.
Yeah.
All I know is I will always be at something. And even if, God willing, I live to 100, I'll be the baddest tiddlywinks player in the old folks' home. You know, I'll still be driving myself to learn something. I'm actually at university as well. I'm studying a sports coaching degree.
Great.
And I also work at a ladies' body transformation / body confidence club. So giving the girls there a good workout. And right now life's really good. I'm very, very lucky. And a lot of that, I've got to be thankful to the journey I've been on for, including the war, all the bad times, because aside from the fact that they led me onto the road that I'm on, I think they also, in a really long-winded way, gave me the tools I needed. Because, as I was saying to you earlier on in our conversation, when I was at school, I didn't dare to try hard.
Yeah.
Now I try so fucking hard. And I think that a lot of that comes from Afghanistan. So when I was younger, I used to avoid fights if I could. You know, I was pretty good at making people laugh. So if it ever kicked off, I'd try and laugh and get a laugh and find my way out of it that way without losing face, you know. But
Yeah.
I was a bit of a coward, though. I was a bit of a pussy. And after Afghanistan, the fighting all the time, I did derive some confidence from that, some self-esteem. Some of that, I think, just came from me accepting the fact that I had the right and the capability to defend myself. And some of it came from the success that I had in doing that, you know, and from beating people up, I guess, which was cruel, but it is what it is. But yeah, it did make a man out of me, Afghanistan, I guess. It just in a really difficult way. I guess it's that age-old adage of lessons will be repeated until they're learned. And I guess the lesson was stick up for yourself. And it was repeated and repeated. And eventually in Afghanistan, it was learned. And I then had to go too far on the other side of it to find the middle ground. Through a lot of therapy, through a lot of self-discovery, through a lot of prayer, a lot of... there's just a lot of all sorts, really. But it's been a wonderful journey. And when I look back, you know, I've had such a fascinating life that I've been so lucky to have had. And a lot of the circumstances I've found myself in or seemed to be at the time disasters, tragedy. And yet it's through those that my greatest successes have come, through the, I guess, adversity. There's post-traumatic growth, isn't there? Yeah, and it's been a 10 out of 10. I would highly recommend. No, I wouldn't. But you know, I just hope that I can. Now that I have children, I say now that I have children. My eldest is she's 18 on next week. But with my children, I hope that I can protect them from a lot of the things that I needed protecting from, whilst also giving them the tools I think that I had to find myself. I lacked a lot of the tools that you need to cope with things in life, and I had to get those tools the hard way. Those healthy coping mechanisms. Yeah. I find when people often talk about how nothing bothers them and they're really, you know, they can cope with anything. You find that oftentimes that's because they've either not had too much to cope with, or they were given the tools early in life by the parents or by the grandparents or somebody. And nobody gave me those tools. My dad was useless. He was just dysfunctional. So I never had the tools to cope with stress. I never had the tools to cope with adversity, difficulty. All I knew was running away, really. And I learned to stand up and face danger the hard way. And that's on the front line in a war. But, you know, eventually armed with the tools I need to cope with minor setbacks. There was a time 10, 15 years ago a minor setback, and I mean the most minor setback, that phone dying while I was trying to talk to you 45 minutes ago, I'd have trashed the house. Chair would have gone out the window.
Yeah.
Probably killed the dog.
Yeah.
I would have lost the plot. And what I would also have not been able to do is speak to you ever again, because I'd have been so ashamed. And now I could just come on and say, I'm terribly sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. I had a bit of a nightmare. It was my fault. I didn't charge the phone. So with the coping mechanisms also come the ability to own my own mistakes. I was blameless for a long time. I wouldn't hold myself responsible for any of my actions. And that, I think, partly was out of shame, but partly was just a coping mechanism. And when you're stronger, you're able to cope with the burden of responsibility. And what I found as I got a little bit older is that with that responsibility, they say with great power comes great responsibility, but I think it works the other way. With great responsibility comes great power. Because once you accept that you're responsible for your outcomes, that means you have the power to dictate how your outcomes look. And, your circumstances are a reflection of your decisions, aren't they? And what I realized is that because I'm responsible for my own actions, that means I have the power to make better decisions. But it means I can't blame other people when they go wrong. And it's empowered me. But yeah, it's been, these lessons have come at a great cost.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful nonetheless,
Tom, your story is absolutely incredible, and there are parts of it that make me so sad, because I hate it when fellow veterans have to go through the same journey I've had to go through in many ways, and I know how dark it's gotten at times, and I can say today that I'm so much better than I was, and I can see the same for you, but the journey continues for both of us, and it will for the rest of the veterans too. And
yeah, absolutely.
Continue making progress. You mentioned one thing, and I've only got a couple more minutes here before the interview finishes, but you mentioned that prayer was important to you. Can you speak to how God is part of your healing journey in the last couple minutes here?
Yeah, sure. So part of the recovery path, I think, for me was, as I was going through combat stress and I was getting into all these different things, I would, it never takes long before you encounter kind of crystals and incense and meditation and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of got into a bit of kind of Buddhist philosophy and doing Tai Chi and stuff. And a couple of years ago, it dawned on me that none of this stuff just didn't quite sit right with me. And it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I could never quite pinpoint why, because I felt that I got a lot of benefit from it. And then Christmas Eve, 2023, I just got this urge to go to church that night. So I went to church, went to midnight mass, Christmas Eve, and then I went to Christmas morning mass. I just filled up with love and joy. I just felt really full. And I realized all this stuff, I was searching for something. And it wasn't until I was willing to put down my previous prejudices against what I thought Jesus' message was about, I guess, and accept maybe I don't know all that much. Maybe I should just go and shut my mouth and listen. And it's been the single greatest anchor in my life. And I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to Jesus for everything that he's done. And I'm humble now, which was, I kind of felt like the final piece that I needed was to not bring him down a peg or two, but just I needed something far greater than myself to. Anyway, it's difficult to put into words. Yeah, really. No, I try and do when I can. I'm very flawed, and I make a lot of mistakes. I'm a terrible example of a Christian, but I'm trying.
No, you've said an important key here, and I don't know if you can see, but I have a hand drawing of of Jesus right back here, because along my whole military,
Yeah.
the whole military wall here, I have to put that there because it's a reminder that my greatest source of healing really has come. And you said it, you said the word anchor. Anchoring myself to Him has been the greatest source of healing. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your story with us through all of the
No, thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure.
disconnectedness we've experienced in the call. I hope that there's a time in the future where we can meet face to face. Maybe I could come out to the UK finally. I've never been, and
I love that. Where do you live, by the way?
I'm in Utah. I'm in the mountains of Utah.
Okay, well, I've never been there, so I'd much rather come to Utah than you come to this hellhole here.
No, I've got to come so I can see you wrestle at the same time. It would be an incredible experience.
Well, if I get a job wrestling in America, I think that would be better. It'd be better for everyone.
Yeah, it actually just snowed here last night, which is crazy because it's so late in the year. But yeah, I've got about this much snow this morning. So.
Oh, it's sunny here. It's I mean, I say sunny. It's warm here, but it's I'm trying to convert it into Fahrenheit. It's 55.
Yeah, that's hot.
It's hot for here, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's cold here. But Tom, thanks very much. We'll stay in contact. I hope we can keep connection and in the future make it work to be in person at some point. But continue your journey. I'm so inspired by your story. And so much of the fact of getting back in shape and finding health to your mind and, making connections with other people and finding that healing journey, it makes me happy at the end. So thanks very much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. You take care. God bless. All right.
Thanks very much, brother. Thanks. Bye.